Okay, so we're going to go through this video here. So this is a Lauren Southern video that she posted 1 day ago, it looks like, which might almost be 2 days ago now. Who knows? She obviously called it Trudeau gun ban fails in record time. So we're going to go to a few different points, and I'm going to just give my thoughts on it. So we're going to start off with, you can obviously go and, I don't know why I'm saying you, because nobody's going to watch this, but you can go and watch this whole video if you want in its entirety. I'm going to go to about 5 minutes here. And there's a quote here that says, Bill C-5 would not stop police from charging people with gun offenses or prosecutors from pursuing convictions, Justin Trudeau said. Continuing on, here's the quotation. What it would do is make sure that criminals face serious penalties while addressing the overrepresentation of Black Canadians and Indigenous people in the criminal justice system. End quote. So we're going to quickly just pop back over this, specifically this part here. What it would do is make sure that criminals face serious penalties, which it would not actually, because it lowers the penalties. It lowers the penalties for those convicted of gun crimes, specifically for Black Canadians and American Indians. And I'm saying Indians because Canada has the Indians Act, so where it refers to them specifically that on a governmental level. So I too will use government terminology. Now, it lowers the penalties. So it removes I believe it's a 3-year minimum penalty to no mandatory minimum. Also, this particular statement alone, I find, is it's an example. Okay, it's an example of a conclusion without facts, meaning he phrases it the overrepresentation of Black Canadians and Indigenous people in the criminal justice system. But there's no citation that they are overrepresented. And what exactly does he mean by overrepresentation? Well, what he means is they outstrip their percentage of the population. But that doesn't mean that they are overrepresented. Maybe they commit crimes and are subsequently convicted of crimes more than other groups. So in which case they would be appropriately represented, and they would be a higher percentage of criminals in society as regards to their particular percentage of that society. That does not mean that there's anything about overrepresentation. It doesn't mean there's anything about racism. It simply means that particular groups might have particular reasons, probably cultural in my opinion, but I don't know. I haven't done a tremendous amount of studies on them, but I believe that it is cultural and particular cultures which are in many cases incentivized by governmental organizations to lead to higher criminal activity. So when I see stuff like this, I always go, I need a citation, please. I need you to prove to me that they are in fact overrepresented. Now, as we go on, we see here that Brian Lilly says, if most of the people being charged with these crimes are Black or Indigenous, then so too are their victims. Do those Black or Indigenous victims deserve less justice? So I think Brian Lilly phrases it better here. Most of the people being charged with these crimes are Black or Indigenous. Okay? But I don't like the fact that nobody ever seems to call out the presupposition on overrepresentation. So we're going to go forward here to about 5:45. And we see the decision also restated, so this here was the Supreme Court acknowledged widespread problems continued to exist with ongoing imposition of conditions that are unnecessary, unreasonable, unduly restrictive, and effectively set the accused up to fail. The decision also restated that in Canada, the law requires bail judges to give particular attention to the circumstances of accused persons who are Indigenous, or those who belong to a vulnerable population overrepresented in the criminal system. So again, we see this overrepresented, right? And we see effectively the judges now, bail judges, are forced to consider the race of the person who is convicted of a crime, who is accused of a crime in the application of bail. So if they feel that you are from a marginalized, or as it says here, a vulnerable population, that you then should have an easier sentence than somebody else. So what this effectively does is this does create a racist situation wherein all citizens of a country are not considered equal. Forget considered, they're not equal. Okay? Certain people are more equal than others. And when we talk about vulnerable populations or marginalized groups or things like that, we then have to say, okay, if a group is considered a vulnerable population, we need to then look, and we're just going to do a quick search here, okay? So I'm just going to minimize. And we get search results. Okay, there's 11 search results for bursaries and Caucasian. And we see here, okay, here's a, here we go, bursary, and, it's someone who is non-Caucasian, okay. Then we see here, this is promising and model crime prevention. Not really what we're looking for. We come down here, it's an annual report of the Office of Correctional Investigator. Okay, annual report of Office of Correctional Investigator. Again, annual report, proportion of Caucasian offenders. Oh, look, a little over 50% of the inmate population is Caucasian. Come down here, 50% of the population is Caucasian. We scroll down. Conquest by law. The two groups, Indian and Caucasian, collided, as did their concepts and embodiment of justice. So that doesn't seem like much of a bursary thing. Here we go. Bursaries for the purpose of providing one or more bursaries for deserving students in the music program. Here we go. So there's one thing, right? One thing there, and it's an archived from 2016. So basically, it's just a transcript. Okay. So now we're going to come up here and we're going to go and do indigenous bursaries. And we're going to search here for indigenous bursaries. Indigenous. Here we go. Bursary search tool. And we pull this up. Look. Available bursaries. There are 521 bursaries found if you're quote-unquote indigenous. But there were nothing for Caucasians. So it seems to me that if you're talking about vulnerable populations, if you're talking about marginalized groups, that's just one thing. That's just one thing. If we went to the Government of Canada board as well, or that website, we would find job applications that say Indigenous people wanted. Okay? That would say, people of color wanted. We find these things there. But there's nothing there that says white people only need apply. Okay? So who is in fact the vulnerable population? If somebody's looking at it completely dispassionately, you would say the person who is given all these preferential treatments, lower levels of bail, easier sentencing, more bursaries, more opportunities for education, and having the government pay for education. All these things seem to really benefit a particular group of people over another. I would say that that is an advantaged group within society. Absolutely. Now, we're going to move on to 715. So where is this here? Okay. So here we go. We see here, she goes through a bunch of different laws. Okay. A bunch of different regulations, I should say, about getting firearm certification. So here's safety training, okay? What you have to do if you are anybody other than an Indian, or as they say here, an Aboriginal, adult or minor, okay? So there's safety training. There are differences with, let's go here, background safety checks. You can even sort of just get a letter from your elder or another community leader to recommend in support of your license application. Okay, fair, fine, that's cool. We can go, where's this here? There's other stuff about minors and stuff. It's pretty small. So there you go. So we got all those different things, okay, different regulations. And I'm not going to play the whole thing, but basically she goes through a number of things here, which you can go and find the video and go through them. Clearly, again, there's preferential treatment. and it's not to the supposedly vulnerable population. Now we go to 807, and here's where we get pedantic, okay? And this kind of stuff really does drive me kind of crazy. People would say, you're just being a stickler, you're being pedantic. And I say, well, yes, maybe I am being pedantic, but I think it makes a difference. Yeah, I think it matters, and I'm going to go through why. Back in 2012, says Gary Mauser, I testified to the Senate that the rate of firearms homicide by licensed individuals, analyzing data from 1997 to 2010, was 0.6 per 100,000 compared to an average national homicide rate of 1.85 per 100,000. Thus, I argued that, while licensed individuals do use their firearms to kill, they are 1/3 less likely to commit murder than an average Canadian. And whenever I hear somebody say something like this, it drives me absolutely batty. Because this is wrong. They are 1/3 as likely to commit murder than an average Canadian. Because 0.6 is 1/3 of 1.85. It is not 1/3 less likely. 1/3 less would be to take 1/3 of this, which is about that 0.6, okay, subtract it from the 1.85, which gives us about a 1.22, 1.23 would be the actual 1/3 less likely. But, and here's why it's important. Here's why these things to me are key. And it really annoys me because this guy's a professor emeritus from Simon Fraser University. He should know better. That 1.22 is still double the 0.6. So what he's saying here, the 1/3 less likely, people think, oh, that's 1/3 less likely. Okay, 1/3 less likely. But it's not. It's even half the amount that he's telling us is the real rate. So he says it's going to effectively, his words here say, it's going to be 1.2 and change. But it's half of that amount. So that is a significant amount. That is a significant difference. And somebody who's a professor emeritus should know this, right? He should understand that this is a serious difference in numbers when we talk about it, okay? It's not just 1/3 less likely. When we hear this kind of thing, people go, oh, okay, that's a little less likely. But no, it is way, way less likely. It is only 1/3 as likely. And then he goes and he talks about it as specifically with males over 18 and how it jumps. And when we get to there, we see that it is PAL holders 0.67, right? And this is just in that male category, 18 and up basically, which is just 0.67 per 100,000. PAL holders, the rate is slightly higher than what it calculated back in 2012 because the time period is different. But even still, PAL holders, which is your firearms license, are half as likely, okay? They are just half the amount of the regular population. So they are still freaking way below. So when we talk about firearms and gun bans and how they don't really make much difference, or at least they don't in the way that the Canadian government is implementing them, we see that that's accurate. This is not targeting these rules, these new governmental laws restricting firearms do not do anything appreciable to affect gun violence and gun homicides. Not by anybody who is officially licensed. So, we're now going to advance to 936. And we're going to actually listen to Lauren Southern here. She's going to do the whole thing, but I don't want to make people wait. It's about a minute. So I'm going to bump this up to 1.75, and we're going to listen to the whole thing that she says, and then I'm going to give my thoughts on it. Here we go.
Is that we are actually pretty good in Canada at denying legal access to people who shouldn't have guns. For example, gang, organized crime members, they can't have guns here. Yet gang killings still involve a firearm 76% of the time, and gangs and organized crime account for 20% of all killings, which is probably why even the Liberals are spending over $300 million on fighting illegal gun trafficking. That's a pretty solid admission that they know what the real problem is, even if they plan on letting the offenders out on bail the next day. Meanwhile, Bill C-21 and other bills like it are obviously just for show. And if gang shootings go down as a result of their spending on preventing illegal trafficking, well, they'll just let the public think it was because they took hunting rifles out of locked safes. In truth, not a single gun ban law proposed by the current Liberal government would have prevented this police shooting. In fact, the only legislation brought forward that it seems would have impacted a shooting like this is the Liberals' implementation of Bill C-5, which will put more violent offenders on the streets like Mackenzie. So much for that.
All right, we're going to go back to 1011 now, and we will notice here what she says.
Meanwhile, Bill C-21 and other bills like it are obviously just for show.
There you go. They are not just for show. They have a distinct purpose, as I've said in other videos. Okay, people are oftentimes willing to say that they attribute to incompetence or stupidity rather than malice. I tend to be of the other side. I tend to be that I attribute to malice or planning rather than stupidity, especially when we get to these higher concept laws like gun control. Because the data is there. The data is there. It's very readily available. And people just need to look at it with any kind of brain power at all, with any kind of objectivity. And they can see what's going on. They can see where the facts are and who's doing the killings with guns. And whether those guns are registered or not. And whether they belong to the person who is the legal holder of that gun. Now, they are not useless. They are specifically there because they want to take guns out of the hands of law-abiding citizens. They want to keep the population de-armed. Okay? They want that. So many countries throughout history have a history of doing this. We look at places like Japan, they've done it. We look at places like Russia. We look at places like North Korea. We look at places like Germany. Tons of places have done this throughout history, and it goes back way further than that. When the leaders are in charge and they disarm the population, that's because they want to be tyrannical. They want to have control of that population. They suddenly have a disarmed population, and what is there to be afraid of? Nothing. They don't have to worry anymore. So, when we look at these laws, and we know these laws aren't going to affect the homicide rate in any appreciable way. It's not going to make people safer, but it's going to make the government safer by disarming the population. Subsequently, they also, in these same bills, they add in provisions that reduce the punishment for people who commit crimes with guns. So they let people out sooner, they have lower bail restrictions, so people get out easier, their sentences are lower, they get out back on the street, and they are free to commit more gun violence. So you end up with a situation where the government now says, whoa, we've had all these killings, we need to get guns off the street, so we're going to make guns illegal. And people go, a certain portion of people will go, okay, we'll buy in because we're so scared of getting shot. Oh my goodness, you've told me that there's all these killings, even though appreciably we've seen the rate per 100,000. It's very small. So they go, oh my goodness, I'm so scared. Please take the guns off the street. And then they enact a law and they get rid of more guns. But then they get more criminals back out on the street because they go, criminals aren't going to follow the law anyway. So who cares? So they get them back out on the street and they continue to make more killings. And then the government can come back and say, oh my goodness, look at these killings. We still have all these gun killings. We need to get more gun control. We need to get more guns out of people's hands. We need to get more hunting rifles and shooting like range guns where people go to the range and they shoot. We need to get those out of people's hands so we can keep people safe. And then people will go, oh my goodness, I'm so scared because of all these shootings. Oh yes, please take more guns off. And it's a cycle. And then they take more guns away. But then they turn around and they say, oh look, gun violence is still up. It's still high. So many people are getting killed. And then the cycle continues, okay, until eventually the only people with guns are criminals. And whether those people were law-abiding citizens at one point and now they've been criminalized because the government has simply said your guns are now illegal and the person hasn't turned in their guns or given them up, or they are actual criminals who just ignore the law and they go and they get guns illegally and they go out and they commit illegal acts with those guns. Either way, it serves the government's purpose because the government always does what it can to get more power and to stay in power. That's the key with government. People who are in power or in the government are there because they seek out power. And people that seek out power and get power do what they have to maintain that power. So let's not kid ourselves. When she says these bills are just for show, she is wrong. She is wrong. They are not just for show. They are to a very specific end. And that very specific end is to take more power for themselves, that is the government, and to take power and authority and independence away from the citizens, and to make the citizens more reliant upon the government, and to be able then to wield force against the population that decides they do not want to be reliant upon and obedient to that government. That's the reality. That's the purpose of this legislation.